Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sunyoung Jang. I am an associate professor of Hanseo University of South Korea and very glad to present to you. Today, I'd like to talk about subjectivity for multicultural families of nursing students. This is content. Introduction. As a family composed of people with different ethics and cultural backgrounds, a multicultural family has cultural differences or values within the family, including married immigrants, North Korean defector, immigrant worker, international student, and refugee. In other words, the multicultural family of Korea is family of foreigners who has married to a person with Korean nationality and foreigner without Korean nationality who request for Korean citizenship. The nurse science is a study based on the understanding of emotion of oneself and others. For a nursing student as a pre-service nurse, it might be important to understand the abilities to accurately understand the emotions of themselves and others based on positive emotional disposition, and also to control suitable situation by using their own emotions. As the core manpower that occupies the biggest part in healthcare medical side and also has most contact with subjects, the nurses should provide the high quality and safe nursing to subjects within the limited time in rapidly changing healthcare medical environment. The subjective of perception when dealing with subjects in nursing sites has great effect on their nursing. Thus, it is important to understand the perception of nurses and pre-service nurses. Thus, this study explored and classified the perception of multicultural families, targeting the nursing students as pre-service nurses. This study aimed to provide the basic data necessary for educating nurses and nursing students exposed to the risk of a multicultural family by understanding the characteristics and differences of each type of perception of multicultural families. The objective of this study is to provide the basic data for suggesting the strategies when educating nurses and nursing students exposed to risk of multicultural families by examining the type of subjective perception of multicultural families and characteristics of the type targeting the nursing students by applying the Q methodology. The concrete objective of this study are as follows. The nursing student's subjective perception of multicultural family is classified. The characteristics of each type of nursing student's perception of multicultural families are analyzed and described. Study method. To archive the objective of this study, after considering the literature, media data, and proceeding research on multicultural families, this study finds the subjective viewing the type of subjective perception of multicultural families targeting the nursing students. In order to exact the comprehensive state about the effect of multicultural families focusing on current nursing students, the Q population was drawn through the consideration of domestic and foreign relevance literature, open-ended questionnaire, individual in-depth interview. Through this process, on top of drawing total 3 area and about 200 Q questionnaire, this study extracts about 100 Q questionnaire by integrating the collected literature through consideration of domestic and foreign literature. Going through the procedure of reviewing, modifying, and the extracted TQ population, finally total 42 samples with high discrimination or selected. This is sampling method. As the P sample, this study selected total 20 nursing students who voluntarily agreed to participate in this study after fully explaining the objectives of this study to them. This slide shows Q classification process and method. 20 nursing students, the time for each participant to complete Q classification was from 35 to 50 minutes on average. Data analysis was performed via kernel PC program, and Q factor analysis utilized principal components factor analysis. The mean and the standard deviation of components were analyzed utilizing SPSS 21 program. Result. In the result of analyzing the subjectivity on multicultural family by using the PC kernel program, there are 3 factors which explain 49.295% of total variance. The factor 1 was 30.68% and the factor 2 was 11.20%. The factor 3, 8.07%. As the factor 1 has explanatory power as much as 30.68%, it could be regarded as the factor that explains the multicultural families the most. The type of subjectivity on multicultural families produced by this type analysis method could be suggested as follows. The first type is type of accepting and acknowledging multicultural families. The characteristics of type 1 is that the Korean society rapidly entered the multicultural society and increasing range of multicultural families would be steep in the future. They think that it is certainly need to understand and acceptance multicultural families, and also to put national effort to overcome any prejudice or irrationality. They said that our society would not lose its own unique culture because of multicultural. They expected that we could accept the strengths of multicultural while keeping our culture at the same time. They said that we would be able to solve the problems of our society with cultural families. Thus, the type 1 was named the type of accepting and acknowledging multicultural families. The second type is type of seeking for institutional support. In the characteristics of the type 2, most of them thought that it would be necessary to provide the cultural educational support for adaptation after forming a cultural family. They said that the national support for policies would be required for the efficient practice of this education and the education in various areas should be supported due to different cultures. They assumed that the adaptation to Korea would be quick if the degrees of understanding of Korean culture were high. Thus, the type 2 was named the type of seeking for institutional support. The third type is type of conservative perception. In the characteristic of the type 3, they thought that the multicultural families would be increased by international knowledge and the understanding of language and culture would be basically essential as they would be residing in Korea in the future. They said that most of cultural family in Korea would be formed when old man is rural area married to foreign woman, so that the level of income or education would be lower than other families. As a lot of multicultural families has a thought situation, there should be a lot of social support for them. However, they said that such excessive support or interest could bring about reverse discrimination. Thus, the type 3 was named the type of conservative perception. Discussion. In the result of this study, the type of subjective on multicultural families perceived by nursing students were divided into the type of accepting and acknowledging multicultural family, the type of seeking for institutional support, and the type of conservative perception. And this study aimed to discuss characteristics of each type. The type shown in this study was the type of accepting and non-acknowledging multicultural family. They said that the multicultural family will be increased due to the gradually increasing international marriages, so that we should accept them naturally. They perceive the multicultural family as being that should be included as members by acknowledging the diversity as a part of our society instead of viewing them with prejudiced eyes. The title was the type of seeking for institutional support. The subjects of this type think that the adaptation of multicultural families should be helped through the active intervention of policies, rather than naturally accepted multicultural families. As Korea is rapidly entering the multicultural society, such various negative sides are also revealed. The type 3 was type of conservative perception. They think that the multicultural families were formed when a person who has passed by the marriages as in married to a person from other country, and as they have to live in Korea, they should learn Korean culture and language for themselves. The subject of this type think that the members of multicultural families has made their own decisions, and the institutional consideration from them could bring about the reverse discrimination in Korean society. This is discussion. This study on the subjectivity could be used as the basic data for the development of adaptation program for multicultural families that have recently grabbed attention. Moreover, in case when providing the education of subjectives of multicultural families to new and experienced nurses in the future, the effective education method suitable for its type could be applied. However, this study targeted only one college and could not select the research subjects by considering the factors have affected on perception of multicultural families, so that it would be limited to generalize the result of this study. Thus, it would be needed to additionally verify the type of composing the Q methods equipped with various backgrounds through follow-up researches. Conclusions. This study provides the base data necessary for developing the multicultural family prevention improvement program for nursing students in the future. By classifying the nursing students' subjectivity on multicultural families. Also, this study could provide the theoretical frame for establishing the individualizing educational measures for the subject on multicultural families at the clinical site of new and experienced nurses in the future. Based on the result of this study, it would be needed to have additional researches on developing a multicultural families intervention program for nursing students. Furthermore, it would be also necessary to have follow-up researches on subjectivity on multicultural families perceived by nursing students, and also develop the educational program. This is the reference. Thank you very much for my for your attention. Now I'd like to open it up for question. Do you have any question? It's done. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sunyoung Jang. I'm an associate professor of Hanseo University of South Korea and very glad to present to you. Today, I'd like to talk about subjectivity for multicultural families of nursing students. This is content. Introduction. As a family composed of people with different ethnic and cultural backgrounds, a multicultural family has cultural differences or values within the family, including married immigrants, North Korean defector, immigrant worker, international student, and refugee. In other words, the multicultural family of Korea is family of foreigners who has married to a person with Korean nationality and foreigner without Korean nationality who request for Korean citizenship. The nurse science is a study based on the understanding of emotion of oneself and others. For a nursing student as a pre-service nurse, it might be important to understand the abilities to accurately understand the emotions of themselves and others based on positive emotional disposition, and also to control suitable situation by using their own emotions. As the core manpower that occupies the biggest part in healthcare medical side and also has most contact with subjects, the nurses should provide the high quality and safe nursing to subjects within the limit time in rapidly changing healthcare medical environment. The subjective of perception when dealing with subjects in nursing sites has great effect on their nursing. Thus, it is important to understand the perception of nurses and pre-service nurses. Thus, this study explored and classified the perception of multicultural families, targeting the nursing students as pre-service nurses. This study aimed to provide the basic data necessary for educating nurses and nursing students exposed to the risk of multicultural family by understanding the characteristics and differences of each type of perception of multicultural families. The objective of this study is to provide the basic data for suggesting the strategies when educating nurses and nursing students exposed to risk of multicultural families by examining the type of subjective perception of multicultural families and characteristics of the type targeting the nursing students by applying the Q methodology. The concrete objective of this study are as follows. The nursing students' subjective perception of multicultural family is classified. The characteristic of each type of nursing students' perception of multicultural families are analyzed and described. Study method. To archive the objective of this study, after considering the literature, media data, and proceeding research on multicultural families, this study finds the subjectivity viewing the type of subjective perception of multicultural families targeting the nursing students. In order to exact the comprehensive statement about the effect of multicultural families focusing on current nursing students, the Q population was drawn through the consideration of domestic and foreign relevance literature, open-ended questionnaire, individual in-depth interview. Through this process, on top of drawing total 3 area and about 200 Q questionnaire, this study extracted about 100 Q questionnaire by integrating the collected literature through consideration of domestic and foreign literature. Going through the procedure of reviewing and modifying and the extracted TQ population, finally total 42 samples with a high discrimination or selected. This is sampling method. As the P sample, this study selected total 20 nursing students who voluntarily agreed to participate in this study after fully explaining the objectives of this study to them. This slide shows Q classification process and method. 20 nursing students, the time for each participant to complete Q classification was from 35 to 50 minutes on average. Data analysis was performed via kernel PC program, and Q factor analysis utilized principal components factor analysis. The mean and the standard deviation of components were analyzed utilizing SPSS 21 program. Result. In the result of analyzing the subjectivity on multicultural family by using the PC kernel program, there are 3 factors which explained 49.295% of total variance. The factor 1 was 30.68% and the factor 2 was 11.20%. The factor 3, 8.07%. As the factor 1 has explanatory power as much as 30.68%, it could be regarded as the factor that explains the multicultural families the most. The type of subjectivity on multicultural families produced by this type analysis method could be suggested as follows. The first type is type of accepting and acknowledging multicultural families. The characteristics of type 1 is that the Korean society rapidly entered the multicultural society and increasing range of multicultural families would be steep in the future. They think that it is certainly need to understand and acceptance multicultural families and also to put national effort to overcome any prejudice or irrationality. They said that our society would not lose its own unique culture because of multicultural. They expected that we could accept the strengths of multicultural while keeping our culture at the same time. They said that we would be able to solve the problems of our society with cultural families. Thus, the type 1 was named the type of accepting and acknowledging multicultural families. The second type is type of seeking for institutional support. In the characteristics of the type 2, most of them thought that it would be necessary to provide the cultural educational support for adaptation after forming a cultural family. They said that the national support for policies would be required for the efficient practice of this education and the education in various areas should be supported due to different cultures. They assumed that the adaptation to Korea would be quick if the degrees of understanding of Korean culture were high. Thus, the type 2 was named the type of seeking for institutional support. The third type is type of conservative perception. In the characteristic of the type 3, they thought that the multicultural families would be increased by international knowledge and the understanding of language and culture would be basically essential as they would be residing in Korea in the future. They said that most of cultural family in Korea would be formed when old man is rural area married to foreign woman, so that the level of income or education would be lower than other families. As a lot of multicultural families has a thought situation, there should be a lot of social support for them. However, they said that such excessive support or interest could bring about reverse discrimination. Thus, the type 3 was named the type of conservative perception. Discussion. In the result of this study, the type of subjective on multicultural families perceived by nursing students were divided into the type of accepting and acknowledging multicultural family, the type of seeking for institutional support, and the type of conservative perception, and this study aimed to discuss characteristics of each type. The type one shown in this study was the type of accepting and non-acknowledging multicultural family. They said that the multicultural family will be increased due to the gradually increasing international marriages, so that we should accept them naturally. They perceive the multicultural family as being that should be included as members by acknowledging the diversity as a part of our society instead of viewing them with prejudiced eyes. The type 2 was the type of seeking for institutional support. The subjects of this type think that the adaptation of multicultural families should be helped through the active intervention of policies, rather than naturally accepted multicultural families. As Korea is rapidly entering the multicultural society, such various negative sides are also revealed. The type 3 was type of conservative perception. They think that the multicultural families were formed when a person who has passed by the marriages age in married to a person from other country, and as they had to live in Korea, they should learn Korean culture and language for themselves. The subject of this type think that the members of multicultural families has made their own decisions, and the institutional consideration from them could bring about the reverse discrimination in Korean society. This is discussion. This study on the subjectivity could be used as the basic data for the development of adaptation program for multicultural families that have recently grabbed attention. Moreover, in case when providing the education of subjectives of multicultural families to new and experienced nurses in the future, the effective education method suitable for its type could be applied. However, this study targeted only one college and could not select the research subjects by considering the factors have affected on perception of multicultural families, so that it would be limited to generalize the result of this study. Thus, it would be needed to additionally verify the type of composing the Q methodology equipped with various backgrounds through follow-up researches. Conclusions. This study provides the base data necessary for developing the multicultural family prevention improvement program for nursing students in the future. By classifying the nursing students' subjectivity on multicultural families. Also, this study could provide the theoretical frame for establishing the individualizing educational measures for the subject on multicultural families at the clinical site of new and experienced nurses in the future. Based on the result of this study, it would be needed to have additional researches on developing a multicultural families intervention program for nursing students. Furthermore, it would be also necessary to have follow-up researches on subjectivity on multicultural families perceived by nursing students, and also develop the educational program. This is the reference. Thank you very much for your attention. Now I'd like to open it up for question. Do you have any question? It's done.